People in Germany in 1923 were doing unusual things like wallpapering their homes with money and heating their homes with it. They didn't know what to do. Had they gone completely insane? Welcome to the Financial Flow. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up on our latest videos. A phenomenon known as hyperinflation gripped Germany in the early 1920s. Germany issued a lot of marks after World War I in order to make large reparations, payments to the Allies. As a result of all this extra cash, prices have continued to rise. In November 1923, 1 trillion marks was needed to buy $1 in the United States. A total of 1 trillion mark notes were in use. Essentially, the mark had no value. Zimbabwe had a similar problem a few years back. Inflation began to soar in earnest in 2007, that it was uncontrollable. Annual inflation was projected at 489 billion% by the International Monetary Fund in September 2008. By comparison, the Zimbabwean dollar was devalued by 99.9% between 2007 and 2008. You have no idea what that might look like. Companies had to modify their rates multiple times a day because the cost of goods was virtually doubling every 24 hours. To keep up with the rising prices, the government issued large denominations of currency. First, there was $1 million bill, then a $1 billion bill, and ultimately, in 2009, an unprecedented $100 trillion bill. Everyone was a billionaire, which was a nice thing, because those monies were practically useless at the time. A country is said to be in hyperinflation if it has a monthly inflation rate of more than 50%, or an annual inflation rate of more than 13,000%. Although Zimbabwe's recent inflation isn't the worst in history, it isn't exceptional. Hungary suffered the worst of all in 1946. By August 1946, the price level in Hungary had risen 3 times as much as it had in July 1945. Using scientific notation to indicate inflation rates is a bad idea. Hyperinflation is harmful for a number of reasons, beyond the apparent one of a lack of clarity in pricing goods. Inflation, and particularly hyperinflation, depletes one's financial resources. They had worked their whole lives and saved up for retirement, but in Zimbabwe, the value of their investments was completely destroyed. Because of the extreme inflation, there is little money available to start new enterprises, because consumers are compelled to spend as rapidly as possible rather than save or lend. In addition, the level of unpredictability has a chilling effect on international trade and investment. As a result of this, hyperinflation is undesirable. But how does it work? Let's head over to the thought bubble now. We're greatly simplifying everything in both Germany and Zimbabwe. The basis of the problem was that the government was printing fresh money to pay its bills. When the money supply is increased, there are 2 possible outcomes. It has the potential to either raise output or raise pricing, or even both. When output reaches its maximum capacity and cannot rise any further, inflation begins. Yet policymakers continue to raise the amount of money available. In theory, the more money you print when output is maximized, the more inflation you'll receive. In Germany, for example, or Zimbabwe, the rate of inflation soared enormously, but this doesn't explain why. Is that how much money the government really printed? But not quite. Many individuals become accustomed to severe inflation after a few years of double price increases. If you're pretending to buy a new refrigerator and you expect prices to climb soon, you can use this information to your advantage. If you want to get your hands on it as quickly as possible, you should do it as soon as feasible. However, when more and more people accept this rationale, cash flow quicker and faster. The velocity of money is the term coined by economists to describe how many times a dollar is spent each year. To put it another way, inflation rises faster when people spend their money as soon as they have it. Pricing rise lead to increased expectations, which leads to even greater increases in prices. When the government issued a new currency to replace the worthless mark, Germany's hyperinflation came to an end. Zimbabwe abolished its currency in order to end its hyperinflation. Its residents now pay in dollars or currencies from other countries nearby their own country for goods and services. Prices have steadied and real GDP has begun to grow since the financial crisis of 2008. Try to avoid inflation when you run a country's economy. Depressions are another thing to avoid. It's difficult to pin down exactly what constitutes a depression, but it's when one's general well-being, GP, steadily declines over an extended period of time. As a result, the unemployment rate rises and prices fall. The term depression was used by the economists prior to the Great Depression to characterize long-term declines in GDP. As a result of the Great Depression, economists began to avoid using the term recession when describing economic downturns. It wasn't simply stockbrokers who were affected by the 1929 stock market crisis. A panic ensued and the economy slowed to a standstill. Of course, the Great Depression wasn't just caused by a lack of money. A lot of people are still debating this issue. Regardless, the economies were in a serious recession. There are more employees than jobs and more output than customers are willing to purchase. Profits plummet as a result, as do prices. According to some economists, were a contributing reason to the Great Depression and other economic downturns. There was a severe reduction in both output and prices in 1929, which set off the Great Depression. The general public began to expect further price declines after that year's fall. An average family's income fell by about 40% as the unemployment rate soared to 25%. This isn't good at all. The central bank was in a predicament when interest rates dropped to zero and prices continued to decline. Even at zero interest, borrowing money was still a lousy deal because of the continuing deflation. Your future repayments will have more purchasing power than your original loan. And because of this, fewer people bought homes or vehicles, and fewer companies took out loans to expand their capacity. In fact, it took over a decade to come out of the Great Depression. Even still, monetary policy did not put an end to this phenomenon. Large-scale government spending during World War II was responsible for this. Hyperinflation is not something you desire. Depressions are the last thing you want to happen to your child. Staggered inflation is likewise undesirable. Slowing or halting production at the same time as rising prices is called inflation. Stagflation is the result of a declining economy coupled with rising prices. A series of supply shocks, including an increase in oil costs and, believe it or not, the death of Peruvian anchovies, which were crucial for animal feed and fertilizers, led to stagflation in the United States. Starting in the 1970s, businesses began to fear that expenses would continue to grow, so they laid off employees, which triggered a recession. A second increase in the amount of money in circulation by the Federal Reserve has increased inflation forecasts even further. When a new Federal Reserve chairman took control in the early 1980s, this came to an end. Paul Volcker was his full name. When he took office, he really reduced the money supply and raised interest rates significantly. Even while output dropped and the unemployment rate rose to 10%, prices and inflation expectations both stopped rising. Paul Volcker was credited with ending stagflation as the economy began to recover. Extreme economic conditions such as hyperinflation, deflation, depression, and stagflation serve as a reminder of the need of accurately measuring and analyzing the entire state of the economy. In certain circumstances, the government's actions or inactivity worsened the situation. In certain circumstances, the government stepped in to help the economy recover. The economy is built on the collective decisions of individuals though. It's the aspirations of folks like ourselves that are important. As long as enough individuals are afraid of a recession, then the economy will experience a downturn. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have a good one.